Hello and welcome to today's Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny panel. We will start with just the introduction of panel members and observers, and we'll introduce other attendees when it comes to the item, if that's all right, where you're presenting. So I'm Jackie Ramsey, I'm the Chair of Adult Health and Social Care Scrutiny and Councillor at Dewsbury South. Bill, would you like to go?
Yes, thank you. I'm Councillor Bill Armour, a Kirkburton Ward Councillor representing the whole of Kirklees on this panel. Thank you.
Helen Clay, Voluntary Co-optee.
Leslie Warner, Council for Colne Valley.
Kim Taylor, Voluntary Co-optee.
Jo Lawson, Councillor for Crossland-Moor and Neverton Ward.
Alison Monroe, Councillor for Almonbury Ward.
Stacey Appleyard, Director of Health Watch Kirklees.
Richard Dunn, Supporting Officer for the panel.
Liz, do you want to introduce yourself?
Afternoon, I'm Liz Smage. I'm Chair of Scrutiny in Kirklees. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. We'll just go through, if you don't mind, minutes of the previous meeting. Has anybody got any issues they want to raise from the minutes of the previous meeting? I'm assuming we believe that they're correct. Yeah, take that's correct. Just as a quick update then on the maternity, we have sent the letter on the 5th of October to the chief execs of both Midgeorts and CHFT and had holding responses. We are expecting them to have a joint birth centre advisory group at some stage, or that will have taken place. And after this meeting, we'll just touch base and see if we can get an update on where they are with responding to that letter. Okay. On unplanned care, I think it would be great if we could note on unplanned care that not only did we resolve to thank the people that had attended meeting, but actually that we had observed that there were long ambulance waits, long trolley waits, delays in discharges, and that the system at the time as we were presented was not working smoothly. So I think we said that we would note something to that effect. Thank you. Is there anything else from the notes of the last meeting? Okay, fantastic. Have we got any interests that need to be declared?
Yeah, I've just got to declare that I'm a non-executive governor for the trust, the hospital trust.
That's CHFT, is it?
Yes, sorry.
And if I can just declare that I'm employed by CHFT Trust as a bank nurse.
Yep, just to say that Health Watch is a part of the Kirklees Health and Care Partnership membership as well. So it should point 6 on the agenda, and possibly, I think that might be it.
Okay, we are a public meeting. I don't think that we've got members of the public attending, but do we have any deputations or petitions, Richard?
None this stage.
Any public questions that have been submitted? No. Okay. All right. So we're on to the main part of our agenda. We've got 2 meaty agenda items today. One around resources covering finance and workforce. So who did we decide was presenting that? Alison Needham?
Yeah, she's leading, yeah.
Alison, would it be possible to keep any presentation down to about 15 minutes, please? Can you coordinate that?
Of course. Yeah, of course I can. So that's between both myself and Steve's element. Is Steve on in the sort of...
Yeah, Steve's here in person.
Say.
What we will do is, if you could introduce who's here on your behalf, or who's here as part of your team on this item, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, sure. So there's myself, I'm Alison Needham. I'm the Operational Director of Finance for Kirklees Healthcare Partnership, and I also work as part of West Yorkshire. So I've got another number of sort of roles within West Yorkshire, and Steve is here as well. So I'll be covering the finance section. I'll keep it brief. Apologies, I'm not there. I've been off ill, and Gary was supposed to be here as well to sort of present. So you've got me today, so I'll try and keep it brief. So is it okay if I share my screen? Can everybody see my screen? Is that okay?
Yes, sorry, we can.
Yes, sorry, that delay thing. So what we've been asked to do is present I'm just hoping it'll work, technical issues. So what I'll be covering today is just the financial landscape of where we're at financially, how we're working as a partnership now, and how all those steps we're taking, a bit of a financial overview, and then I think Richard Parry's there who might cover off some of the local authority elements, but I'll try and cover off as I can, and then I'll hand over to Steve. So what I just wanted to cover off, and you will have the pack, is how we're changing. So what I just wanted to cover off is, as a landscape within Kirklees, we became the new West Yorkshire ICB back on the 1st of July. So we ceased the operation of the CCG at that point. We had to close down the operation. So we've had 2 year ends, which has been a bit of a challenge for us, but obviously keeps us on its toes. So just to give a bit of context, and there's quite a few bits there, we've been working as a West Yorkshire finance community for a really long time now. So for me, this is no real change about how we're working. Our allocations, the money that we get in for for Kirklees, comes through West Yorkshire and then gets allocated through to us. So I've been working with my counterparts at Calderdale, Foundation Trust, Mid Yorkshire, Swift, Locala, Leeds, and all our other partners in the system for a good 2 years now. So I think we've got a really good nationally track record of delivering sort of how we operate together as a system. So as we moved into, I'll move on to my next slide. So what we've come together is how do we work together to make sure we don't destabilise all the work we're doing? How do we work together as a West Yorkshire, but also local partners? So I've touched on that we've worked together for 2 years really well. We've got a control total. So for ourselves, we've got a West Yorkshire control total. That means whatever we have to spend within that value. We've been working on very strange frameworks like my colleagues have within the local authority due to COVID. So we're just coming out of that now, but we have had different frameworks in place to support us over the last couple of years, which has been really challenging. And what we're doing is we're moving towards more value-based, outcome-based, moving away from payment by results, which is how the trusts were paid back. We've had aligned incentive contracts with our local providers for a really long time now, and we're working together to get those outcomes rather than sort of destabilising by trying to generate income. So as a system in West Yorkshire, we've come together to develop a financial strategy. And this is again about outcomes. How do we deliver within the resources? How do we make ourselves more sustainable? Bringing that green agenda in. How do we deliver the best services that we can for our population, and to understand how we can diminish the risk around health inequalities? And that's one of the things that I think is going to be fundamental and a real benefit of us working together around sort of working as a system. So we've created quite trusting relationships, and it's took time, but we're there. I think I feel quite comfortable in sort of having conversations with trusts and other healthcare partnerships in the system. And we've created strategies around that, which also has fed into our Kirklees Place strategy of how we will work financially. We've also got a really strong financial governance infrastructure. We were always really well led in relation to governance, but that hasn't changed. We've sort of harnessed that to incorporate wider sets of people in there. So I just wanted to touch around how we allocate funds. So I know that was one of the questions that was raised. We receive money into the West Yorkshire. That comes through to the ICS, which is the Integrated Care System for West Yorkshire. That then comes through to our place, and that's sort of how we fund and support services moving forward. We take into account population health needs, and that will develop as we move forward, so we can get some real sort of really rich data around how we deliver services a little bit better and where they should be focused on. And we have got continuation around investing in mental health and community services, because I think that's really important, and they are some clear national targets what we've got. So we've created, what I've tried to show on the slides here is where do we sit as Kirklees under this new West Yorkshire system. So you can see here, it's quite a complex system. You've got West Yorkshire, and there we're a little bit in between Wakefield and Calderdale. And what's interesting for Kirklees, we share our main providers, Mid Yorkshire with Wakefield, and we also share Calderdale Foundation Trust with Calderdale Healthcare Partnership. So we work not only together within Kirklees, we work really closely with Wakefield. We also work really closely with Calderdale, and then we've got our mental health partnership trust who actually sit under there. So we're quite a complex system, but we have got experience of working as a system. So this slide shows you how the financial partnership works. So you can see as West Yorkshire, it is focused on health, but I see it's not just health. You can see from a financial reporting perspective, there's Kirklees, which is the old CCG, the new healthcare partnership, the 2 trusts, the 3 trusts. But actually, it's really interesting. I know, and there's other people there who are actually part of our committee. For us, Kirklees is much wider. It's got a much wider partnership system working. It's around how do we get the pound in the right place and deliver the best value and outcome for those patients. And I think our objective is to ensure that we get the best value for the spend that we've got, because like everything financially, it is challenging at the moment. So just moving on to the financial overview. So from a West Yorkshire perspective, slides are catching up, is that we have a challenging position. We've submitted West Yorkshire-wise a plan in relation to achieving a break even, but with a slight small surplus. You won't see it in the notes. You can see that some of the systems, like the Kirklees, we've got more financially challenged. Calderdale and Huddersfield Trust, they've submitted a planned deficit of 17.4 million. So we do recognise that we need to do something different. And how do we do things once? How do we share learning? How do we share efficiencies? And how do we share a culture of being inclusive and delivering the best outcomes for patients? I've touched on the complexity, so I'm trying to be really brief. I've touched on the complexities of Kirklees. So the 4 organisations feed into West Yorkshire as a reporting tool. So you've got the 4 areas. We, as a contract, and I won't go into too much detail because it can lose people's mind. We hold 50% of Calderdale Foundation Trust contracts, so we tend to get a share of that deficit or benefit as it is for Swift. So you can see that coming through. So we've reported as a Kirklees place combined a £9.1 million deficit for this financial year. But we need to recognise we've got other providers in there. We've got Locala, we've got local authority who actually feed into our place, who are really key stakeholders. And as we develop the system and how we work together, my reports include this wider sort of financial information of these organisations. So moving on to month 6, what Gary really wanted to sort of stress, without going into too much detail, is there is quite significant risks. And I think you've just been touching on the pressures we've seen in the system around discharge. So currently in our plan, we're seeing a slight deterioration. So we've not released that at the moment in relation to our position, but we have flagged that our position overall could deteriorate by £3.4 million. And as a system, my colleagues in each place would say those are in relation to the independent sector. We were trying to clear backlogs, and the funding flows are quite complex, and we're struggling around that elective recovery fund. We can see escalating pressures in the discharge bed sort of arena. I know I've been working with my colleagues in the local authority to try and move things along and put things in place to try and get the system working better. To make savings in this situation is really, really hard, as you can all appreciate. So what we're trying to do is find those efficiencies without making any detrimental risk to patient outcome. We're still in waves of COVID, and that's what some of the trusts wanted to flag. You know, the Mid-Yorkshire a couple of weeks ago would seen sort of some rise in COVID cases, and it's usually around 10 days later around that it hits Calderdale. So you can see that coming through. Like every organisation, the inflationary cost pressures are just really hard at the moment to manage. Anything where we're doing capital investment, it's really challenging because market forces are really high and cost is just a problem. And like it will be in the local authority, there's the staff pay rate escalations and strikes and various things that are sort of coming through. So I think one of the other areas is around out of area placements and mental health. So that's one of the sort of the key elements that our sort of mental health sort of providers wanted to sort of mention, is that there's greater acute sort of acute pressures, which is pushing patients out, and we're really sort of working hard to keep those patients in area. So I'm going to just sort of highlight, and if Richard Parry's there, if he wants to add anything to this. Eamon has put in a couple of slides around the financial position around the local authority and the pressures they have. You can see I'm not a local authority colleague, so I don't want to sort of say anything that that's not correct, but I know they've got some real escalating problems in the adult social care. At Q1 it was 400k, but if anybody wants to add to that, or I can take questions and I can get those back to you. So financial overview. We're going through a challenging time, like everybody. Next year is probably going to be even more challenging. We've got a really big underlying position that we need to sort out. And we're sort of managing it this year by non-recurrent means and the historical sort of flexibility that we've got. But we can see the cost of living challenges, the potential austerity measures that are coming from the government, which is challenging in itself. So we know that we sort of, for us to succeed, it's imperative that we actually work together to try and deliver those values and those outcomes, whilst creating efficiencies and make the system as streamlined as it possibly can be, and that everybody gets the care that they need. So I think that covers everything that Gary wanted to do. We are looking at recovery. So I'm sort of the finance lead in the healthcare partnership. So I'm sort of placed ourselves, and I think Vicky Dutchburn, my colleague, is there in the auditorium today, might talk about some bits around performance, but we have placed ourselves in a recovery. And how do we work as a system? So I think it's really important that we work together as a system to challenge ourselves of how do we work differently? How do we sort of take away the pound, but sort of think about how we can move services and people and resources around the system a little bit better? So I think hopefully I've kept that brief. If anybody's got any questions, I'll happily take them, but I'll pass over to Steve. I'll stop sharing now, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Alison. I don't know whether we pause at this stage or whether we hear the workforce stuff at this stage. Who was presenting with regards to workforce? Are you doing workforce? We took longer there than probably we anticipated. I know we've got questions that relate to finance colleagues. How quick can you get through the workforce? All right, yeah, okay, we'll do that then. We'll start with panel members, if that's okay. And would it be all right? I think we were expecting Alison to introduce people as they, you know, that we're helping in that. So when you are asked to speak, would you mind just giving your name and title to start off with? Can we just go to the panel and see whether or not there are questions from a finance point of view? That's all right, Helen.
It's just a quick question, really. On the final slide, the finance summary, just of those sort of 2, 3 and 4 points, kind of what timescale, how, those sort of things I think would be of interest as to, you know, when will a recovery plan and strategy appear? What are the plans on point 3 to make that happen, and how? So just some sort of timescale and outcomes on that, if that's possible, please.
Yeah, sure. So we've already started on the recovery plan, so that has been sort of drafted already. We are working, we've got some sort of independent support as well to work with us as a system to try and identify areas where we can do things differently and work more cohesively, I would say. So I would say the timeline is probably, we're already on that journey. In relation to the scale of the challenge, I think we've been doing lots of development sessions. I know there was one last week around how do we sort of manage this. So there was everybody who was on the committee, which has every party who are part of Kirklees healthcare system, is coming together and thinking, right, how do we do things differently? How can we move? But with anything like this, it's probably like moving a tanker around. It's going to take some time. I mean, I think we need to recognise that whilst we are working as one financially, it will take time to sort of turn that tide around. So I'd say, you know, it just depends as well what comes out of the budget in the next couple of weeks. You know, it could change things again. You know, we're expecting probably no growth, etc., but it could change. So I think for me, in relation to timelines, the recovery process has started, and that is an ongoing process that's done both locally and West Yorkshire. So I'd say it's an ongoing process. I wouldn't say there's a definitive timeline, but it has started and the work is going, and recovery takes a while. So.
Thank you, Alison. Is that all right?
Just to sort of just question slightly further, in terms of some of the plans, are there some? I understand that what may change with government announcements, but are there sort of aspirations? Are there any specifics that have been agreed, or a hope of what will happen?
So currently at the moment, as a system financially, we've created a recovery plan. We've got areas of quick savings program. Sorry, I'm talking in health terms. Sorry, of how we do that. But also we've got sort of plans around what will we look like next year. So we're working on our financial plans as it stands at the moment, identifying where the risks are, where we can make savings, how we can do things differently. So our plans have to be submitted, I would say, in January. So we should have a financial plan around that time. In relation to the local authority, I don't know the timelines of their sort of planning cycle, but from a health perspective, we will be working over the next 3 months to get to a point where we understand what the risks are and how then do we sort of mitigate those moving forward. So those are the most immediate timelines in relation to health budgets.
Okay, I'll just move us on with questions if you're all right. If you feel as though there's something that you need to add as kind of like a participant, please make sure that you let us aware. I'm going to Leslie next, sorry.
Thank you. My question's really linked to what has already been said. And having been in this role for nearly 4 years, you know, the word challenge just, you know, is forever with you. And the thing that slightly worries me as we sort of appear to be heading for a perfect storm is you talk about the known challenges which require even greater efficiencies, and you also talk about requiring partners to think and work differently. Now, you know, in big letters is the word how. When you're already been working on these strategies for as long as I've been involved, and how do you also help prevent if staff have to be relocated or partners have to work in a different way? There's always that risk of people thinking, I don't need this anymore. And, you know, people could decide that they want to leave or just become on temporary banking or whatever. So, you know, your job is obviously not easy at all. But I just, when I see these even greater efficiencies and changing the way of working, I'm just concerned how you keep staff morale up.
I think for me, I think that's one of the greatest challenges. I think whenever I'm presenting anything, I'm always saying, yeah, we've not got much, we've got limited resources, but I think we've got limited staffing. I think for me, it's, and Steve may come on to this, and I probably will pass on to Steve around the staffing element. But what I've seen, because I lead a number of work streams within West Yorkshire around virtual ward, which is where people are trying to do, the staff are trying to come together and do things differently, creating sort of greater digital sort of investment around that to reduce the burden on staff. So I probably wouldn't disagree around the challenges in relation to, because we've been here for a couple of years, and I think next year is going to be really, really hard. But I think what's different this year is, and moving forward, we are coming together as a system. This is the first time I've actually sat down with my finance colleagues. So we've been working together, but actually sat down as a group, making decisions together, making sort of putting the challenge in together rather than it just being the CCG sort of doing something or the local authority maybe doing something over here. It's actually quite a pleasant place to be, that we're actually sharing, we can share staffing, we can share buildings. I look after IT and estates. I'm trying to develop an estate strategy that actually harnesses as much sort of resources that we've got that can potentially reduce cost in the future. Whenever you've got a monumental challenge that we're facing at the moment, it's not going to be a quick win. And I've said that throughout the whole sort of process when I'm talking to our internally at the committee. This is going to be a long-term process to actually make a change. Yes, we have got a financial challenge. How long do we take to do that? And I think for me, we can make quick wins. We can probably cut a little bit of waste out, but how do we get all of these staff together and all of these resources, invest in the IT and create more of a green agenda, which is probably one of my things that I sort of champion in West Yorkshire as well, is how do we get that to actually change the services that we need? I know I'll use an example, and Amanda has been working with staff who's doing some night sitting work, who can support people getting out of hospital a little bit quicker by just putting very basic IT equipment in there. And if we can do that for small, how do we do that bigger and better? But it's not going to be a quick win. I'm not going to say and be unrealistic by saying I'm going to have solved the problem financially, or Gary has place lead. It's going to take a few years, and it's going to take a few challenges and some tough decisions, but hopefully as a system working together, that will help. I'm quite excited about it, and as a finance person, we don't always get very excited, so I think for me it's a real opportunity, and that's what Gary really wanted to focus on as part of this presentation, that this is a real opportunity to change things. We've not done things like this before, so hopefully, I know I can't give you an answer, but hopefully I can give you some assurance that we are sort of trying to stem the tide as the financial challenge grows.
Okay, thanks. Can I just ask at what point, though, staff are consulted and reassured when all these changes are happening, so that you don't sort of find staff morale feeling, you know, it's even more pressure on them?
Steve, do you want to come on this one?
Hiya, so I'll just introduce myself as well. So I'm Steve Brennan, I'm the Kirklees Place Programme Director. So I'm employed by the ICB, but I work on behalf of the Kirklees Health and Care Partnership. So in terms of how staff are engaged in all of these processes, so some of the changes that have already happened, so for example, the move from the CCGs into the ICB, there was a full and proper engagement exercise about how that worked and how the transition was managed and so on. When we do things like efficiency plans and things like that and service change, again, staff are always key to how that happens. So they're always engaged in those particular service changes. And when I come on to my presentation, I'll just touch on some of the health and wellbeing initiatives we've got in place as well that tries to help with a more general looking after our staff and keeping morale up and things, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Jackie. My question was along the lines of with the financial overview and the risks, is the one regarding temporary staff pay rate escalation and unplanned care activity searches. How many of these staff on, say, the front line will actually be from agencies, or will you be utilising staff banks?
I couldn't answer that question. I'm not going to lie and sort of say I can answer that question because I come from the commissioning side of this sort of arm. So anybody who's on the front line will be awarded the Agenda for Change pay rate. But I can take that question back if that would help, because I'm not from a trust and I wouldn't want to sort of answer it incorrectly.
We have got a couple of trust reps here, haven't we? I don't know whether you want to pick that up or whether we want to get a response later. Hi, Susan.
Hello there, my name is Suzanne Dunkley, Director of Workforce and OD at CHFT. That's a great question. So we try and go through our bank as much as we possibly can. We do sometimes have to revert to agency, but our preference is that we go through bank. We have existing colleagues on substantive contracts who sign up to bank for extra contractual shifts, and that's where you would see the additional payments. But we do adopt Agenda for Change, but as you will of course be aware that as we've gone through the last few months and as we go through the next few months, we are looking at whatever incentives we can put in place to make sure that those vacant shifts are filled. But we will try wherever we possibly can to go to our bank first rather than agency.
Thanks very much. Alison. Oh, sorry. Would you like to?
Hi, I'm Darryl Thompson, Chief Nurse at Swift. So just to echo my colleague at CHFT's approach, we would always go for bank first, and we have a group that helps us to oversee agency costs as well. But I guess just to flag from a safety point of view, we will use agency colleagues if it is about maintaining safety and services.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Alison, your
Thank you. Mine's just, my question is in relation to the financial overview. I just wondered when this data was gathered together, and because obviously we've had the cost of living crisis, which has suddenly, caused due to the recent mini budget, has caused enormous rises in interest rates. Inflation this morning was running at 10.8%, which is a further rise. And so I just wondered if these figures were compiled before the mini budget. And so in relation, and the cost of living crisis has escalated. So I was wondering how that's going to affect adult social care and people who are working in that sector, heating, energy, how is that going to be impacted? Thank you.
Richard.
So, two key areas of adult social care delivery: domiciliary care. So for domiciliary care, that we'd already programmed in an uplift in pay for providers from April this year. And we're currently running, actually, we've probably got as much domiciliary care supply as we need. We're sort of short by 17 hours this week, which is a much better position than many neighbouring councils. But obviously for domiciliary care staff, petrol, diesel costs have been the biggest kind of pressure for them. So we have put in place some interim arrangements which effectively kicked in at the beginning of this financial year, to pay providers more so that they can pay their staff more to cover travel costs, which reflects the increase in cost of petrol and diesel. For residential care providers, the big cost pressures for them that have moved in the last few months, obviously around the cost of food, And as we head into, particularly heading into winter, the cost of utilities, so gas and electric around lighting and heating. What we have seen, of course, is some recent national interventions over the winter period for businesses as well. That's kind of constrained that, and we're in ongoing conversations with providers about what those areas of inflation mean. I think looking forward into next year, the big risk is that national minimum wage is likely to increase at a rate that's been higher than projected. So the typically 5% uplifts already forecast going forward. Those are likely to need to increase significantly given inflation is running at 10%, and that's not yet built into any of our budget planning. So that's probably the biggest single area of risk, because for both domiciliary care and residential care providers, by far the biggest single cost is not food and utilities or petrol and diesel, it is staffing costs. So that will become, I think, a significant pressure for next financial year.
Could you just answer? Just wondered if you could tell me if the data that makes up this report was compiled before the mini budget, or
Sorry, Richard. I know you didn't introduce yourself. I wonder if you could just do that, and then Vicky, would you?
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm Richard Pound, Strategic Director for Adults and Health at Kirklees Council, and Vicky can probably amplify on this, but in a sense, we're in a moving position where actually some of the implications don't become immediately clear in terms of actually how this will wash through the system and drive a set of cost pressures. So I think it's one of those things where positions will keep changing over the coming months.
And it's Vicky Dutchburn, Director of Operational Delivery for Kirklees Place. The information in your pack was pre the mini budget, just because of time scales to get your papers, etc., circulated, and also it reflects the reportable position of the place as well.
Okay, I've just got a couple of comments and questions, if that's all right. Alison, thank you very much for having a positive outlook on it around the opportunities, I think, around working together and economies of scale. I'm not as sure as you that we haven't trimmed a lot of the fat that there is in public services. So, and I'm not quite sure what scope there is for further savings, but obviously I'm glad that you've got that positive attitude. Can you just help me? Is the management and overhead costs of the new system, new structure, more or less than previously? I'll come back to my other questions.
So from a healthcare perspective, we are allocated a running cost budget. So what we receive is three types of budget in health. We receive a running cost budget, we receive a programme budget which pays for all healthcare services, which is the big chunk, and primary care. As a system, we are not allowed to spend over that allocation that we receive. So no, it's cost no more than what it was before. What we're doing is working very differently. So for me, I work in Kirklees Healthcare Partnership. So my remit is to look after finances, but I also look after primary care and all the community sort of work and various things. So what we're trying to do is we have roles within in local, but we also have roles within West Yorkshire as well to sort of bring that overview, because I think that's what's really good, is actually see what's happening and what's the really good work. So I'm going to pick on Vicky Dutchburn, who's already introduced herself. She has a number of work streams that she's responsible in West Yorkshire. So no, it's costing no more than what it currently costs before.
That's great. Thank you very much for that kind of like reassurance. Just looking at the split of spend, mental health seemed to be underspending, and as a junior manager I was always taught that underspending was as bad as overspending because I was impacting on quality. So, but acute or overspending, certainly from a CHFT, is that because the budgets are not balanced correctly, or is that something else that people would like to comment on, SWIFT and CHFT?
We share your concern about underspending. We would clearly be wanting to spend that money on staff and on our estates projects. The proportion of our finances as a largely mental health provider is always more towards staffing than our acute providers. But yeah, the challenge for us is around recruitment. We are trying many different incentives to recruitment, different advertising campaigns, and also international recruitment. But that would be the main rationale behind our underspend.
Don't know, is anybody from CHFT who wishes to comment?
I think Suzanne does.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Chair. Most definitely, and panel will know that CHFT does have an underlying deficit. What's driving a lot of that is our inability to come out of COVID costs. The number of COVID positive patients in our trust went from around about 2 right back up to nearly 100 within the space of a couple of weeks. So we're unable to exit that cost. And like my colleague from Swift, we sometimes have to put in temporary measures in order to fill vacancy gaps, which are national vacancies, which all trusts struggle to recruit to, particularly in our emergency departments, but also in some of our technical specialties such as neurology. But the panel will be aware that CHFT does have an underlying deficit. This is not a new deficit this financial year.
Thank you very much, Suzanne.
Can I also give some assurance? Sorry. Can I also give some assurances as well? So, yes, Swift from a provider are actually underspending at the moment, and they've highlighted some of the pressures there is, a lot of it. But as a system, as a West Yorkshire, we have to achieve our mental health investment standard. So within Bradford, Coaldale, all the ICB ones that are on that financial overview, we all have to spend over, I think it's around 6% above what we spent last year, and we're all achieving that mental health investment standard. So you may not see it from a trust perspective, but from a system spend, we're actually spending more and more on mental health investment, and are doing lots of work to try and improve and do things once over a system from a West Yorkshire perspective, which I'm involved in. So I just wanted to give you that assurance around that, especially on mental health, because it's something that's really important that we continue to do. And it's not, because sometimes numbers give you a very false picture of where we're at, and but behind the scenes there's lots of investments, and it's not just within a trust, it could be within the voluntary care sector, it could be with other providers. So we do actually have lots of contracts for mental health services in other areas. I just wanted to give you that assurance.
Thank you very much, Alison. Steve, if it would be possible to do your part within about 10 minutes max, and then we can take questions on there, with the view of hoping to end this bit at about past.
Yep, that's fine, that's not a problem. Richard, is somebody going to share my presentation, or shall I just talk to it? Have people got copies of it? If people have got copies, I'll just talk to it, if that's okay, if that saves a bit of time. Yeah. So I won't, again, what I won't do is I won't talk through each page of the presentation in detail. So there was a little bit in there about context, where we've just listed the number of organisations, the range of organisations and the size of their workforce. That was really in there just to sort of, I know people know this already, but it's to show you the number of moving parts that there are in the system. So the work around workforce is quite complex and takes place at many different levels. And then later on, what I've tried to do is articulate how, as a system, both in Kirklees and across West Yorkshire, we try and bring that together where we can do and where it's helpful in terms of making the most out of what we're trying to achieve. In terms of the recruitment, the retention challenges and so on, again, we've touched on some of those already. We do have ongoing challenges in terms of recruiting staff across the health and social care system. There are certain professions that are particularly have those pressures. So, for example, nursing is one that's common across the different organisations and the different sectors. In terms of retention, keeping hold of staff is a priority for all of the organisations, and I'll talk in a little bit about some of the health and wellbeing initiatives that we've got. And it may be that some of the providers want to talk about their internal approaches to that as well. And there's some, I guess, emerging trends, if you like, is that coming out of COVID, a number of individuals' work-life balance seems to have changed. So that has impacts in terms of both recruiting and retaining staff. New roles, there are a number of new roles, both in terms of development of new roles and the deployment of roles differently in terms of how the work is done, and they often take quite a little bit of time to work through and come through the system. If I just take you on to the slide which begins to talk about the future workforce and supply pipeline planning. So that's talking there about the multi-year workforce modelling process that's underway at the moment. So that's led by Health Education and the West Yorkshire ICS. From a Kirklees perspective, we're actively involved in that. And it's the first time I can remember for a few years where we've had a single process that's attempting to bring workforce data together from a whole range of organisations and sectors and to begin to think forward kind of more than 2 years. So it's a 5-year process in total. I think it's really important because what that will help inform are the future training plans that are coming through the universities. And this is the bit where we begin to train the workforce for sort of 4 or 5 years' time, but it does take a while for that to feed through. So it's important, but it's not necessarily going to impact straight away. Having said that, although I think this is the most coordinated approach I've seen, it's not that we've started from a blank page, it has gone on before, so we're building on what's been in place already. The other thing we're trying to do in Kirklees as part of that, so at the minute, the process is starting with NHS, and in this context that includes Locala, which is good because sometimes they don't always get included, GPs and adult social care, and the hope is that it's grown outwards from that over the next few years. But we have already involved other sectors in that, so community pharmacy, West Yorkshire and third sector and so on, so that we're bringing those into that process wherever we can. I'll talk really briefly about the next slide, which is a continuing professional development. So again, there's a process in place there that looks at how we develop our existing staff, and that does include staff from other sectors. It's not just NHS focused. So again, we've obviously moved to the West Yorkshire ICB and ICS since the 1st of July. As a partnership, we're on with refreshing our existing people strategy. So this is something that we've already had, but we're just kind of refreshing that in light of a new set of circumstances. It's not finished yet, but the emerging areas of focus that are coming out of that are around growing our staff for the future, looking after our people, new ways of working and systems leadership. So again, at a West Yorkshire level, the things that we're going to be working on are the things that matter to us in Kirklees. And we're actively engaged in that work to make sure that we get the most benefit out of it, and also we contribute to how it's developed going forward. So some things that we're kind of on with and have been for a little while in Kirklees itself. So there's a slide in there that talks about overseas recruitment. I think the focus to date has been primarily about nursing roles. Both Mid Yorkshire and CHFT have recruited a number of nursing roles over the past few years. I think points to highlight that kind of struck me was there's a huge amount of time, effort and energy and resources that go into recruiting overseas nurses, so it is not a quick fix. And all the organisations that do it in a very ethical way, and they're very conscious of that, both in terms of where we recruit from and then how we look after the individuals once they get over to this country. As a result of that, the attrition rates are incredibly small. So it's worth the time and effort that's put in, because once we recruit people, they do tend to stay and they do enjoy working here. A couple of people mentioned to me that we've got a really good reputation for our bit of the world when we're doing overseas recruitment. So the word on the street in some of these countries is that Kirklees is a good place to come to, which is always helpful. Mid Yorkshire in particular are recruiting some overseas midwives. So that's a bit of an expansion of the roles. And Locala are piloting recruiting some community nursing staff at the minute. I think the first handful of those have turned up in October, and there's some more coming over the next few months. Local employment, again, there's just a few things in here. I won't go through all the detail, otherwise we might not potentially have time to get through to questions. So there's some information in here about our Calderdale and Kirklees Health and Care programme. So this is something that we've been running for not quite a couple of years yet, but we're getting to that point. We started it just before the COVID pandemic came on, but we managed to get it up and running during COVID. We switched to a lot of virtual events rather than what we'd initially planned, which was kind of a lot of in-school work. Ultimately, we've ended up with a mix of both now, because both have value and both have benefits. The basic idea of the programme is to get careers in health and social care more at the forefront of young people's minds when they're coming through secondary school, and to try and target the people who we might ordinarily not target. So it's to try and attract everybody, not just the ones that we already think might be thinking of a career in health and social care. There's a few figures in there in terms of how far we've managed to get so far, and that programme continues to grow year on year. One other thing I will just highlight on that one, it's a Calderdale and Kirklees programme. And the reason I do that is that not everything we do is just on the Kirklees footprint, because Calderdale and Kirklees Career Service, for example, who are instrumental in it, they cover Calderdale and Kirklees. From a CHFT perspective, they work in both geographies, and from individuals' points of view, we don't all live, work and play in the same area. We are also, I think, this year looking to pilot it in a couple of schools over towards the Wakefield end of the geography. So again, it's not an exclusive thing. We're quite happy to sort of develop these things wherever there's an energy to do them. And like I say, that is really about getting it at the forefront of people's minds. We've got some evidence at the moment that it impacts on the individual pupils who'll go through it, and we are tracking kind of onward data in terms of where people then go. It's a little bit early to get a full picture of that yet, but we are keen that we do track that. I'll skip on to the section where it starts talking about supporting people into employment. And again, the second slide on there has got a few specific examples of the work that we've done. And there's colleagues in the room who can talk about this work more generally if we want to. Again, I think there's a few things that are worth mentioning on this. One is the work is, some of it is individual organisations do it of their own accord, and that makes perfect sense because they're the ones who employ these staff. Some of it is work that we've very much done in partnership. So some of the Prince's Trust work, not all of it, but some of it is an opportunity that came up at West Yorkshire level that we kind of grabbed with both hands, and then we've tried to link the partners in together to make the best use of that. I think in here it talks about creating 40 jobs. At the minute, as at the end of last week, I think we've got 23 people who signed up for those posts, with more to come over the next few weeks. The other bit is it's trying to be an inclusive way of recruiting. So these are different ways of recruiting people and helping people who might otherwise not find it so easy to get an employment into the workforce. So I think there's a few things there in that sort of partnership working and how we're trying to recruit and who we're trying to recruit that's quite important. Into care initiatives, some of you may already have heard about this. So again, this is a way that's been ongoing for, how long is it now, Phil?
Just over 2 years.
Yeah, so this is an innovative way of helping people into the domiciliary and social care sector. So again, I think that's a good example of things in Kirklees that are not quite just doing the same things over and over again. And again, there's some numbers in there in terms of the impact that that's had. Staff health and wellbeing. So we've had some initiatives that have been in place across Kirklees for probably about 18 months now. We secured some additional funding from West Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership. Our approach to that was we're very mindful that individual organisations, particularly the big ones, have a lot of initiatives already in place that are successful in terms of looking after their staff health and wellbeing. So very much what's in here is on top of that. It's trying to complement what individual organisations have got. And we are also mindful that not all organisations, particularly the small ones, have the same ability to do that for their own staff. So we've made these available to staff from both social care and the third sector. And what we've also done is involve the third sector in helping deliver the programme so that they are part of delivering it, as well as their staff having access to that and other bits of it. There's an added value to that over and above the health and wellbeing of individuals, which is, and I do know this from speaking to the third sector, it makes them feel genuinely more part of our health and care system because we include them in it from the outset rather than sometimes as an afterthought. Again, there's a little graph in there that came from the psychological support that just showed the shift in people's health and well-being as a result of accessing the support we've put in place. A few pictures there from the health and wellbeing conference that we had at the stadium a couple of weeks ago. And following that, we've now launched our Compassionate Leadership Programme. between about 20 and 30, depending on venue size, of individuals who will come through that, and that's a way of sort of embedding and helping people have a more compassionate approach going forward. So helping to build that compassionate culture rather than just trying to help people who are potentially suffering. So it's trying to get in there quite early on all of that. There's a few slides at the end that's a provider's perspective from Swift. I don't know whether we want to talk to those or not. It doesn't matter necessarily if we don't. Part of the reason for including those was, and we could have done this for all of or any of the providers, is to kind of give you that sort of layer of, depending where you look at it, the breadth and depth of what's going on is quite significant. Impossible to capture all of it in here, so this was just a little bit more detail about what one provider's doing, some of which you'll recognise from what I've already said. Some is specific because individual providers have different kind of priorities and so on. So I'll stop there, and that'll give us some time for questions. I don't know whether anybody else wanted to add anything before we move on to those.
It looks like not. But thank you, Steve. I'm sure there are questions, and I know I've got a question that relates to the Swift part, so I'm sure that'll be fine. Stacey, I'm very conscious that you have said that you need to go at some stage. Did you have questions that you wanted to put?
No, not in terms of questions, just a couple of comments from us. We are still hearing from quite a lot of people about staff and workforce, but not in terms of pressures. It's around the quality of care that they're receiving, and actually they're still reporting that people are feeling positive about the support they're receiving. Excuse me. Even though patients and people know that services are stretched, they are still reporting to us, especially, that their quality of care and the staff attitudes that they are receiving is excellent. So that's just the feedback that we've got recently.
Stacey, just introduce yourself so that we can have it on record.
Stacey Appleyard, Director of Healthwatch Kirklees.
And that's very reassuring, isn't it, that we're in such a difficult position for both health and adult social care, that the feedback from patients is that staff are kind and compassionate and helpful. That's great. I'm going to go the other way around this time with questions. Alison, have you got any questions?
Yeah, obviously, I mean, recruiting your staff is you know, of fundamental importance. So I just had a question around the bursaries that were reintroduced for nurses, but that doesn't cover the fees for studying, though. Is that correct? I'm just wondering if anything's being done, you know, about that, or if anything can be done about that.
Thank you. That's not an area I know too much of the detail about. I don't know, Suzanne, whether you do or whether I just need to come back on that.
I think we need to come back on that, Steve, because I want to give an answer that was specific and detailed. But the CPD funding that was returned is being utilised, if that relates to the question.
So I think the question was about what do the bursaries cover, is that correct? Yeah. I'll get you an answer on that.
Yeah, it's just a sort of very simple question, really. This recruiting overseas, obviously you want everyone to come to Kirklees, West Yorkshire, wherever. Is there a national programme, or are all the different trusts competing to out-bribe or out-entice or you know, like obviously it's preferable to come north than staying in London for cost of living, etc. So I just wondered if it's coordinated in any way.
I'll start, and I think Phil might want to just add to that as well. So across Yorkshire and Humber, Health Education England do take a bit of a coordination role in terms of how we do the recruitment and where we recruit from. So it's it's a balance of individual organisations recruiting, and then there is some work and there are other programmes that happen that mean it is coordinated. It's not just each individual provider or geography on their own, if that makes sense.
Hi, I'm Phil Longworth. I work for the council. Part of my remit is to support adult social care workforce development. It's not just about the acute trusts. and GPs being recruited from abroad. There's actually a programme starting around social care staff being recruited from abroad, and that is being coordinated. And the intent is very early days yet, but the intention is to have one local authority in each integrated care board area who's taking the lead on it. So there will be one authority in Kirklees, one authority in West Yorkshire saying to people from abroad, come to West Yorkshire, because I guess when you're abroad, the nuance of what's Kirklees, what's Calderdale probably isn't that important.
Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay Jensen. I'm Deputy Chief People Officer at Swift. Nice to see you all. I suppose, yes, just adding on, I think Health Education England are supporting this, and as you say, we're now trying to look at this on a system footprint. But I think there is an element of competition because we have to sell ourselves as an area. So we're doing quite a bit of work of, I suppose, in a way, trying to show the north, you know, in terms of what the attractions are for the north over the south. And certainly from our position, we've just really got into international nurse recruitment, and certainly people coming in have really valued coming into our areas, and actually we're now finding people from the south wanting to come up to and join us in the north. So we don't want to have that internal competition, but it's bound to be that. That happens generally anyway, doesn't it? But I think it is about just making sure people understand what they're coming into, isn't it, in the areas. And certainly in terms of, I know there's lots of challenges around cost of living, but actually it is a little bit cheaper up here in the north, isn't it? So we've got to capitalise on our benefits, I think, haven't we, really, as well? Thank you.
Suzanne, you did have your hand up. Has that passed?
I think it's to agree with my other colleagues, but there are different levels of recruitment from an international point of view. So CHFT will do that coordinated through Health Education England, but we're doing a pilot project with Locala to look at community nursing. And it's just to make sure the panel is aware that a lot of work goes into the pastoral care side of international nursing. We are having to look on the horizon for whether the cost of living does impact on international nursing in particular, feeling that this is an option for them. But I would agree with my colleague from Swift that actually we do really well in both Calderdale and Kirklees at attracting people to an area that people can find affordable accommodation, but is actually really beautiful. And I think both of the areas are very friendly as places to work as well. So we've got a lot going for us in this regard.
A couple of you now mentioned pastoral care, and I'm really glad that you have. In another role, I help coordinate a food bank, and we have nurses that have been recruited overseas. Well, no, a nurse, let's be factually correct, that's been recruited from overseas who has no recourse to public funds and is now ill and unable to work at the moment. So I'm interested to just understand when you say pastoral care, do you mean that? Because, you know, obviously it's very difficult situations.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in here and Suzanne may want to join. And I suppose from our point of view, it's really important. So as soon as people have, we've gone out and actually taken people from the airport into some of our areas if we need to do, we've actually given them a pack money to start off, make sure they've got the right clothes, they've got the right accommodation. We're offering them transport from where they're staying into the hospital sites. We're maintaining that throughout, so they've got a point of contact. We've had one lady who's had a baby since she's been with us, so we've been helping with baby clothes and baby equipment. So I think you can't underestimate the support of people coming in into our area that just don't know anything about the area, don't know anything about our country, don't know anything about. So we've got somebody full-time who is looking after our nurses, and it's really important. Then we also support them to work in the teams and in the communities, and they get to know what's happening in the local communities from some of the areas they're coming from. So it is key, and I think we've really understood that, and I think certainly the nurses that we've got about 13 so far, really valued that pastoral care, and that will continue as we go on. And it can't be underestimated in terms of giving people that support, and then as we've heard, keeping them with us, I think. So yeah, thank you.
I think my point is it's great when they're able to work, but when they're not able to work, they've got no access to money. But thank you very much for that. Leslie? No? Do you have any questions? Just a couple of questions then, if it's all right. Swift, thank you very much for that provider report. I thought it just gives a little bit more context. If I'm correct in looking at it, you've got 14.1% vacancy at the moment, and you have 4.3% off sick. So that's nearly 20% of your workforce not available for work at any one time. Is that comparable? Is that mirrored in the other organisations? Because that's a significant, and I think it's important we show that.
If I give a general answer, and I don't know whether some of the other providers might want to come in and just give it from their perspective. So in terms of the overall size of both the NHS, and again, including Locala in that, and the social care workforce, that has actually increased over the past 12 months. So the size of the workforce is increasing. I think one of the issues is it's probably not increasing quite as quickly enough as we would like it to, and that obviously has an impact on vacancy rates. So whilst vacancy rates and sickness is not great, the overall size of the workforce is growing. So I don't know, I'll pause there, and I don't know whether, Suzanne, you wanted to give a CHFT perspective on vacancies and sickness?
Yes, most definitely. So CHFT does really well just in terms of comparison with the other acute trusts across West Yorkshire. So our absence is about 5% at the moment, but that includes our COVID absence. And the panel will be, of course, aware that sometimes COVID doesn't show on a lateral flow test, so we have to be really cautious with people returning to the workforce. In terms of vacancies, as Steve has said, because the workforce is growing, it might make that vacancy level look larger than it was previously. And another indicator that is possibly helpful is the turnover rate. So CHFT's turnover rate is 8% at the moment, which again, it compares very well with other acute trusts, but it is a challenge. And as you quite rightly say, you know, we are down a percentage of our workforce before we've even started. That is where our bank comes in very handy. Most of the colleagues on our bank are either substantive staff of CHFT or of other trusts locally. So they are taking on extra shifts, and one of the big things that we're trying to do, and I know this is common to all of the organisations that are with us today, is to focus really hard on health and wellbeing, and that covers the financial, mental health and physical wellbeing of our colleagues. And I from colleague from Health Watch, is really great to see, because on the whole we are still able to deliver outstanding compassionate care due to the dedication and commitment of our colleagues.
Does anybody want from social care or Midyachts?
I just wanted to, is that okay? Sorry. It's not about this. I just had a quick comment about international recruitment and the competing, to highlight for panel that we're not just competing nationally, we're competing internationally. So the United States, Ireland, Europe, Saudi, they are all going to the same countries we're going to, internationally recruiting. So it's just to flag that we're really needing to sell all of our areas, and we are getting good feedback and good uptake, but it's just for awareness that it's not just us.
Just to add a little bit around the wider adult social care workforce, we haven't got access to as up-to-date data, because the workforce is employed across 216 CQC regulated providers, and there's also several thousand personal assistants, so we haven't got the live data, but we have got some historic data from last year. And I think the biggest issue is the turnover rate, which was 16%. If you look at turnover rate for people who are providing direct hands-on care, it's 19%. So there's a lot of churn in a lot of the providers. So the vacancy rate is probably a less good indicator of anything, but that turnover rate. But the sort of the balancing factor for that is how many people are approaching us via Intercare, who are saying, I'm interested in working in social care. And over the last we've got much better data for that, because it's our service and we run it. So over the last 6 months, we've had over 800 people who've come to us and said, I'm interested in working in social care. So, and I think that's something we need to think about in terms of balancing how much time and effort we spend going to other countries, because there are lots of people in Kirklees who are saying they want to work in social care. And I think part of that is, like Steve was saying, people rethinking what's important to them. We have managed to do, as Richard alluded to before, put more money into how much people are getting paid. So now you can get paid as much working in Aldi as you do working in social care. It is not the case that you can go and get a job in a supermarket getting paid lots more. Yeah, so just a few of those points. It's a different sector that's got a different set of dynamics in it. And certainly most people aren't, most people who work in the Colne Valley aren't thinking, I'm going to get a different job and I'll go and work in Dewsbury. If they're working in social care, it is very much a local market for local people, if you'll pardon the pun.
Yeah, I suppose just to add to that, I think we are seeing that we are able to recruit people and our recruitment activity has gone up, but I think it's the bit that Steve mentioned about really focusing on retention and keeping those people in. I think it's been a tough few years, hasn't it, working in the health sector, so we've really got to focus on their well-being. What is it they want to do to be able to develop? What is it that we need to understand is around flexibility, that work-life balance. So when we try to show the information here is we're very much focused on recruitment, but retention is even becoming more of an issue for us in terms of getting that stable workforce and then thinking about what is the incentives, what are the extras, what do we need to do extra to keep them. So we've got to focus on both. We can't just do one or the other, I think. And I'm particularly looking at that local employment where really, anchor institutions, really looking at where we've got into areas that we haven't employed, and some of the stuff that Steve talked about is really where we want to focus as well as that international pull. We see that stopgap, but actually we want to grow our own course.
Thank you very much. Steve, I'm sure you'll be able to reassure me on this, but do we have a good understanding of our age profile of the workforce? I'm sure we do. And have you then mapped out when you think we have got bigger risks than we've got now, potentially as cohorts of people come to the age that they perhaps would wish to retire?
Sorry, I forgot to push my button. Yeah, we do. So we've got the data that shows the age profile of the workforce, both in health and social care. Individual providers already map out where they expect their recruitment and retention profiles to go. I think one of the added advantages of the multi-year workforce modelling that I mentioned earlier is that we'll get a much more coherent view of that across a system, and we'll get a much better shared understanding of that over a number of years. So that will definitely add to what individual providers and sectors already have. So yes, we do have that.
So if we were to ask you when are the bigger risks, you'd be able to give us that information, when we anticipate that there are issues going to be coming up?
We can. I've got it. It's in my pack here somewhere. But I could do that. And I think the benefit of the multi-year workforce modelling is because when you look at the age profile within social care and healthcare at a high level, it looks very similar in terms of what the average age is and how many people are approaching retirement and so on. I think there's probably more subtleties in that by certain professions within both health and care. So I think once we get that multi-year workforce modelling, that'll definitely add to what we already know.
Thank you very much. Okay.
If I could just come back, Phil, about a question about the pay and particularly home care and care home providers. Is that more a projected sort of that the churn will lessen after the fair pay? Is it fair pay for care? Fair I don't know the term. Is that likely to be, because that I understand that's going to include travel and mileage. So and we might come on to that later in terms of projected costs, but it was when you were saying that, were you referring to that as the you were talking about now?
If I can start, and I think Rich will come in. So I've got a breakdown of the adverts that we've been handling on behalf of providers over the last few months. And about 60% of them are at or above the real living wage, which is £10.90. So right now, people are realising they probably need, not everybody, that they need to pay people a little bit better. That doesn't take into account any future changes in the rates that the council pays for the care it commissions. But Richard can speak more to that.
Thanks. So we, 2.5 years ago, made a local intervention into the domiciliary care market, which increased pay in the domiciliary care market, moved us from about 8,500 to 18,000 hours a week of domiciliary care being provided. and we've got a 17-hour shortfall, so we're probably one of the best placed councils, I'd suggest, in the country. We are making a similar intervention with the residential care sector around additional funding that will be targeted purely at staff pay. And we've been working through the sector with that. But that, again, is a local intervention that's come out of some funding between ourselves and what was the CCG. The fair cost of care exercise is essentially part of national social care funding reforms. And that's primarily around, at the moment, if a care home had 2 people in it, one was paying for the care themselves, one was funded by the local authority. And I'm using very simplistic figures, but typically the person who's paying for their own care will pay more than the council's paying. And so you might have 2 people of £500 from the council, £1,000 from the self-funder. And these are not real figures, but that makes the maths easy. £1,500 to that provider. The fair cost of care says the council's rate should go up to 750, and the amount the person is paying for their own care should come down to 750. So they are both paying the same. The provider still only has £1,500, so they do not have money to invest in the business or to increase staff pay. All it is doing is moving who is paying. It's not increasing the total pot. And that's the premise behind the fair cost of care exercise. It does not necessarily lead to an increase in investment in that business or into staff pay. And obviously those social care reforms and the funding for them are being kind of worked through nationally at the moment. So I think there will continue to be the need to kind of make local interventions where we're able to around that, recognising it brings a benefit to providers in terms of reduced turnover costs and obviously a benefit to people particularly living in residential homes around greater continuity of staffing. The fair cost of care is not the same as kind of workforce autonomy.
So does that mean that the investment in travel that Kirklees currently provides, I understand, will that continue then, that it won't be covered by the scheme that you've just been talking about?
So that's local funding initiative, and obviously the ability to sustain that will be predicated on the outcome of national kind of funding, which will, clearly we've got a budget in a fortnight's time. That'll give a sense of what funding will be available to local councils to invest in social care, and so continuing that into the future will be kind of predicated on that and the overall settlement for social care. Because social care isn't a ring-fenced budget within the council. The council has to balance to a bottom line.
I'm going to draw this item to an end, and I think we'd all like, as a panel, to say thank you very much to the individuals who've come along. It is a credit to the services that you are providing that we have still got good quality care in the situation that we're in. So thank you very, very much. Okay, we are actually going to take a couple of minutes break just to make sure that we've got people that are potentially outside and let others drift if they want to go. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're back. I'm sorry about that, Susan. I think you kind of only saw a blank screen for a while. We're going straight into a presentation regarding capacity and demand. I think, Vicky, would you like to introduce yourself and your team? And I've just been reminded by one of our panel members, can you bring your microphone down when you're talking so people can actually hear it and it picks it up on the audio? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So the way that we'll approach this today is if we do a quick round of introductions so you know who everybody is, and then we'll go into the presentation. The presentation that we're going to take you through is a much shortened presentation than the one you've got in your pack. You've got a very detailed one in your pack. We're just drawing out some key insights and then we can lead into questions. So I'm Vicky Dutchburn, as I introduced myself last time. I'm the Director of Operational Delivery and Performance for Kirklees Place. If we move around from Keighley and then...
Hi, I'm Keely Robson. I'm the Director of Operations for Surgery at Mid Yorkshire Hospitals. I'm here on behalf of Trudy Davies, the Chief Operating Officer.
Good afternoon. I'm Johnny Hammond. I'm the Acting Chief Operating Officer at Calderdale and Huddersfield Trust.
I'm Andrew Bottomley. I lead the elective care programme for Kirklees ICS.
Hello, I'm Catherine Riley. I'm Associate Director of Strategy at Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust.
Hi, I'm John Haig, Finance Manager for Kirklees Council supporting adult social care.
Hello, I'm Amanda Evans and I'm Service Director for Adult Social Care Operations for the Kirklees Council.
So, as I said, the presentation we're going to take you through is a shortened presentation, and different colleagues will contribute at different points for their specific organisational elements. What we've just done on the first set of slides that you've got, the first two, is just outlining the specific question that we had from the committee themselves, and then the approach that we've taken to completing the information in the pack. So we've done this as a multi-partner presentation, and we have tried to make sure that we have answered all the specific questions that you've asked. We've given very specific detail, and as per the earlier presentation that you've got, it was done at a point in time, which includes up to the end of August data for you, because that's the most relevant, well, most up to date and the published data that we have available. I'm going to hand over now to Johnny to start the presentation, and I'll just keep moving the slides and then people come in.
Thanks, Vicky. So I'll just run through the briefer pack, or the start of the briefer pack. So overall for Calderdale and Huddersfield, our waiting list is reducing in line with the recovery trajectories that we've set, and our ambition to reduce patients waiting over 104 weeks, 78 weeks, and 52 weeks is on track, and the detail is shown in the broader pack. In terms of surgery, more broadly, we do have some difficulties in some areas. So one of those being in ophthalmology, particularly with glaucoma, and that's linked to the surgeon availability. ENT, particularly head and neck, and maxillofacial surgery. We are working with the independent sector, and we do have outsourcing and insourcing arrangements in place in order to increase our capacity. For gynecology, it is challenging to find support from the independent sector, and therefore we haven't as yet been able to outsource work. We have, though, seen an uptick in our gynecology activity more recently with restarting surgery at Calderdale site. In terms of medical, the challenges that we have are in neurology, and we're working with the independent sector there. And as a result of that, we've seen a significant reduction in the length of waits, particularly for our new patients. And we're also using the independent sector to do consultant triage, so a review of the referrals that have come in and whether they need a consultant input or whether they can be managed through primary care or so on. We are providing additional clinics for rheumatology as well, and we're doing that in-house. So we've been quite successful in increasing the volume that we're doing with our own rheumatology consultants, and that's having an improved impact on our waiting times. And then for dermatology is one of our challenged areas. We are managing the 2-week wait position in dermatology, but as we see an increase in our 2-week waits, it does have an impact on our more routine referrals. And so therefore we are currently assessing what independent sector support we can get to try and improve that position as well. I'll just pass over now to Keely.
Thank you, Johnny. I moved on. I can't see that far. So our overall waiting list reduction is in line with our recovery trajectory, but in terms of our total waiting list, it is growing at the moment. That's due to, in particular, to our referral demand. We do have mitigation via the use of the shared referral pathway and the overall planned care programme, which is part of the detailed pack. We haven't had any 104-week waits in Mid-Yorkshire at all, so that's quite positive. And our ambition to reduce patients waiting over 78 weeks and 52 remains on track. In the pack, you'll see we had 30 patients over 78 weeks, which is the best in region. Our most pressured service, like Johnny said, ENT, it's medical staffing. Gynaecology is linked to the complex surgery we have within gynaecology. Orthopaedics and ophthalmology is also linked to the glaucoma area, which is medical availability.
So in terms of demand and capacity for adult social care, we have seen significant increases in demand, both from people who are supporting in the community, but also for discharge support. We're working in a risk-based way, so we try to keep a balance of risk across the community and the hospital. However, very cognizant of the pressures in hospital discharges and the need to support the whole system so that ultimately we don't have people waiting in ambulances. So we do have people in the community who are waiting for assessments, and we do that on an individual risk-based approach. It's worth noting in terms of discharge support that we did a snapshot analysis in terms of demand in the first week of September last year compared with this year, and it looks that was evidencing approximately 40 additional discharge referrals per week that are being managed by the teams with no additional resources there in terms of the team capacity to do. But despite that, they are getting through that work and maintaining flow. And that is in the context, I won't rehearse it now, but we do have significant recruitment and resourcing issues in terms of our qualified workforce, so social workers, occupational therapists, to support our Care Act statutory duties. We have a higher level of acuity, so we're seeing the average care package size increase. Some of that's the success of keeping people at home rather than accessing care home placements, but some of it is the higher level of complexity of people being discharged earlier in their recovery and rehabilitation journey. We are sustaining a discharge to assess approach, so we are making sure that we are helping people to make decisions about long-term care needs in the right place and at the right time, so after they've benefited from any rehab and rehabilitation and having the chance to settle in an appropriate environment. And home first is our preferred approach, so we are working really intensively to support people to go home, to manage the risks of people going home from hospital, recovering and having rehabilitation in their own environments where they can best recover. In terms of market sufficiency, the discharge to assess beds national funding ended in March, but we have got a local resource in place to help us to continue to place people away from the hospitals whilst we undertake assessments. We're trying to reduce the reliance on those beds as a system because they're not particularly affordable to us, but we're working in close partnership across the system. And those D2A beds have a higher placement rate agreed, so the cost of those is increased, and that is in recognition of the high volume, quick turnover nature that has an impact on those end providers in care home settings. To support the care homes, I think Richard's talked about the support for care homes and domiciliary care. We're almost now at 19,000 hours of domiciliary care a week. And as Richard says, that is an amazing turnaround and a variance to many local authorities. We're working on the fair cost of care, which we've already covered, and Richard's talked about the mileage rate. So the last slide that I've got here is around assistive technology, and in the previous session we talked a little bit about how can we do more, how can we support more people within our available resources, and one of the options that we're exploring is around assistive technology to support people rather than relying on manpower. So we're looking at technology that we can give to people on discharge so that they are assured that they can summons help if they are not well when they go home, or if there is anything unanticipated, that we are assured that they would be able to summons help. So we're exploring that to make sure that we can extend our reach within available resources and keep people safe. The community equipment services don't often get much of a mention, but they work 7 days a week, delivering equipment right across Kirklees, nursing and social care equipment, hoists and others. We are seeing increased demand in the complexity of that equipment. So people who come out of hospital earlier in their recovery journey have an increased need for equipment for moving and handling. We've got an increase in the same day requests. So as we work to discharge to assess, and we try and get people home the same day and the next day, the demand for equipment to be delivered on the same day as the request is increased, and that has a premium cost to us as a system. So we're trying to understand that and make sure that we are working within our resources as effectively as we can. And then the other thing that we've done with the community equipment services, we've relaxed the criteria to loan equipment to care homes. That directly impacts on the quality of care that those care homes can provide, but it stops them feeling as though there's a deterrent to taking people who've got complex equipment needs because of that additional cost burden on the care provider. So it's at a cost to us as a system, but as a system, it's a better outcome within our combined resources. So we're working to that at the moment.
I'm conscious that Philippa doesn't look to have rejoined it. Is she? Is Philippa there?
Here. I'm here.
There you go. She's just not showing up on screen. Sorry, Philippa.
No, that's all right. I'll probably pop up in a minute once I've sorted. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Philippa Stiles, Director of Operational Delivery at Locala, and I've joined the call this afternoon with my colleague Helen Duke. So as you'll have seen in the data pack, there has been a significant increase in our waiting times. Teams are working really hard to reduce these as quickly as possible and working to utilise any capacity in any area of the business to support with that, and working in partnership with colleagues across the system to look at how we can deliver services more collaboratively and in a more timely way. It's really important that anyone waiting on these lists are risk assessed, and we're assessing everybody on those lists, prioritising and reprioritising as we need to, ensuring people are kept safe. And we're looking at continuously improving and innovating the way we deliver those services to provide safe, high quality services in as timely a way as possible. And the last point is really important, just making sure our teams are communicating with people waiting for appointments and treatment, keeping them up to date as much as we possibly can, and supporting and signposting whenever we recognise there is or might be an impact on their treatment. Thank you very much.
Hi, so we were asked a specific question about community diagnostic centres and whether they would impact on the capacity and demand issues at the moment. So there's just a couple of slides here that describe the wait times for the types of services that you will attend a community diagnostic centre for in the future. So this is Mid Yorkshire's diagnostic waiting times, and if we just go on to the next slide, that's CHFT's diagnostic waiting times. I think all I really wanted to say in the context of this is community diagnostic centres are a national programme. Apologies if the panel don't know much about it. We have put forward 2 business cases to develop community diagnostic centres. One in we're working on a Calderdale, Kirklees, Wakefield footprint, one in Kirklees and one in Wakefield. And we will be putting forward a further business case for smaller CDCs, and another one of those will be in Kirklees. However, in terms of timing and for the purpose of this meeting, they're not relevant for the waiting times right now. So I can come and do a further discussion if you want at some point, but I don't want to take up your time with it today.
So the next few slides are just on primary care, and Catherine Wormstone is down to present this. However, there's another meeting overlapping, so I see that she's not quite... Oh, Catherine, has she arrived? So Catherine, I was going to say we'll put her questions last as well, but I'm glad she's here now. So I'll hand over to Catherine.
No, I am here. Thanks, Vicky. So hi, I'm Catherine Wormstone. I'm Director of Primary Care for Kirklees ICB. So just a couple of slides from me. I think you've talked about sort of where we can see pressure and increasing demand, and there's very sort of public awareness of some of the pressures that primary care, and when I say primary care, general practice is facing. So it is a priority work stream for us across West Yorkshire, but particularly in Kirklees. From the 1st of October, we've seen some changes, particularly for appointments outside of core working hours. So from the 1st of October, our primary care networks have taken over responsibility for delivering appointments into the evening and on Saturdays. So that is a slight change from what we've had previously. So not as many appointments now being offered on a Sunday, but they're much more a sort of availability, continuity of care, and sort of follow-up, wider range of services available into those evening and weekends. So recovering demand is a challenge, as it is elsewhere in the NHS, and appointments and demand for appointments and wider range of professionals is much higher than it was pre-pandemic. We've got the same pressures with recruiting and maintaining the workforce, particularly seeing that with reception posts and some of the lower paid posts in general practice. But we've got a good range of professionals now recruited through what's known as the Additional Roles Reimbursement Scheme. So that covers a wide range of professions such as clinical pharmacists, physiotherapists. More recently, we've got some new roles around sort of care coordinators, and I think we've spoken previously around the really valuable support that we get from social prescribing link workers who are really helping to join up care and signpost appropriately. I think we do know that the way that patients engage with general practice has changed through the pandemic, and still lots of patients who want to be able to see a GP face-to-face. I don't think that will ever change, and I think that's really important and certainly clinically necessary at times. But an increasing number of patients who are more comfortable with the digital first offer, so being able to request appointments and even sort of participate in e-consultations with their general practice, and sometimes that means they can get an answer quicker and sort of not bother a GP with a full consultation, because they can get the answer quite quickly back through email. Through winter, we do see those increased requests for appointments, and certainly whilst we're doing all of that, we're maintaining the focus on COVID vaccination and flu vaccination, which again puts pressure on the workforce, but is a vital part of our winter resilience, just to make sure that as many people as possible, and particularly in care homes and housebound, are receiving their vaccination. So the graph that's there on the screen, and I think is in your pack, just shows the pattern of increasing demand for general practice over the last couple of years, and you can see quite quickly that demand is much higher than it was pre-pandemic. So next slide, please. So some of the things that we're doing to try and help and address some of the additional pressures, we're scaling up the Additional Roles Reimbursement Scheme. So in Kirklees, that's 150 people now recruited across all of the practices. It's a bit of a challenge sometimes to house them and to put them into our often quite small GP practice premises, but it's really adding to that resilience and supporting the whole team approach to get a sort of a diversity of professions into general practice. Expansion of capacity, putting additional appointments in, so not only on evenings and weekends, but also during core hours as well, particularly over that winter period. There's some national funding announced to be able to support some of that. A focus on really reducing workload and the admin burden, and especially where there's an interface between primary and secondary care. And there was a recently published framework to be able to help us identify some of the practices and PCNs who are struggling the most. So again, we can target our efforts and resources to help them and assist them where we can. And just thinking through some of those challenges that I described around the primary care estate, that again, national funding announced to see where we can develop premises or expand premises so that we can house this ever expanding workforce and really try and make it sort of fit for the way that general practice needs to consult with patients at the moment. So I think that's it from me.
Thank you. So that takes us through a shortened version of the detailed packs that we gave you. So that allows us now time for questions from the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky, and thank you for keeping the presentation a bit shorter. Thank you. I think I'll go first this time, if that's all right. Can I just double check the waiting lists that we've been provided? They are Kirklees lens, are they, rather than just waiting lists for mid-Yorks and for CHFT, Ocala, etc.
Yeah. For the Mid-Yorkshire, it's our footprint, so it does include the Wakefield data.
So it's not a Kirklees
It's not
lens.
just Kirklees, no.
No, and for ours it includes Calderdale as well.
Okay, all right. So we've missed out on one of our golden threads. We must be more clear next time. That's no problem. Thank you. Can I ask about, obviously, your trajectories? I'm just starting with Acute Trust first, if that's all right. Your trajectories say that you're both on track now to hit nobody waiting over 52 weeks by March, both of them. But you look to already have some drift against that, and we've got winter coming. How comfortable are you that you think you'll make that?
Is it okay if I go first? So we're on trajectory to hit the external target that we were asked to meet by NHS England and Improvement. There is an internal target that we have to try and get to zero waiting over 52 weeks. So that's a stretch target that we've pushed ourselves as an organisation on. So the chart that you've got is our trajectory against that stretch target. The external target, though, we are on track to meet. But in relation to what you mentioned about winter and how we protect the capacity through the winter, that's absolutely a priority, that we continue with the recovery programme through the winter. And in order to try to do that, we have protected wards, and therefore, if there is escalation through winter, that would be the last thing that we would go into. So, absolutely, every effort has been being made to try and protect that elective capacity.
Thank you very much, and thank you for highlighting the national and the local. That's helpful. Oh, sorry, Mid-Yorks.
Yeah, very similar to Calderdale. We are on track in terms of the national targets, and ahead of track. We've got a stretch target by no more than 300 by March 2023, which we are on track to deliver. Winter will be incredibly difficult, but we are quite privileged to have two cold site elective operating at Dewsbury and Pontefract, so we will be maximising those cold sites as much as possible over winter.
Thank you very much. My mum's in that cold site at the moment, so I'll just and she's 91. She's not there for surgical reasons. So anyway, CHFT and Mid-Yorks, quite a difference in the number of waits. Are you saying that Mid-Yorks got a more opportunity because of the cold sites? Is that what you're saying compared to CHFT, or is that legacy too?
Oh, sorry.
The only reason I said shall I come in first is just about some of the history. So during COVID, when obviously a lot of electives, etc., were nationally stood down and we were told to stand those down, each of our trusts, as we started to stand services back up, took two different approaches, and Mid-Yorks went at a quicker pace than CHFT, so that they identified specialities, etc., to work at first. So that's the part of the reason why we're in two different positions about the wait times.
I'd just like to read from some Health Watch notes that Stacey left us, if that's okay. Certainly, from a patient perspective, it does appear that access to services and the wait is one of the biggest areas of concern that's raised with them. She's certainly highlighting the impact upon not only the physical but on the emotional well-being of patients, and the fact that they are often not in as good a state for surgery by the length of wait. I know you already are aware of that. I think one of the questions that one of the panel members was going to ask you, but it's been asked by Health Watch, is about how do you ensure that people are communicated with and that you are having that ongoing dialogue throughout that waiting time, especially when they are significant.
Thank you. From a Mid-Yorkshire perspective, we do aim to communicate with the patients on our waiting list quite regularly. We do that via text, we do that via letters, and we do aim to try and validate our waiting list as much as possible. There is a balance to be met though, because I'd rather consultants also be seeing patients in clinic than, you know, going through hundreds and hundreds of patients, which takes time also. So there is a balance, but we do it as frequent as possible, and it's mainly an administration task in terms of writing to patients to say, do they still wish to remain on the waiting list, and do they wish to contact us if any significant changes, and they can do that via the consultant secretary.
It's a very similar position for us at CHFT. Absolutely every effort is made to try and stay in contact with patients. But like Kitty's saying, a lot of that happens through the secretaries, and we reinforce that with letters to patients. We do also really focus on validation and prioritisation. So there is an ongoing validation process to check whether patients need to be raised up the priority order.
Can I just ask one more on?
I'm going to say, can I just come in on that? I think one of the things that's also worth mentioning at this point is the work that's been done by both trusts around some of the vulnerable patient groups as well. So while they've done that validation and that work, they've also kept in very close contact with, for example, our learning disability populations to make sure that they're well communicated with and that they're prioritised if required, and that the reasonable adjustments are made to support those people. So even though it's done on a clinical need, they've also looked at the equity position and supported those vulnerable client groups that we've got in the system.
Thank you. Can I just ask one more on acute, and then I'm going to ask if we can go on acute, and we'll tackle the others in a bit. What's the in-house activity compared to the outsourcing activity from the point of view of managing your waiting list? What kind of percentage split have you got?
I don't have the percentage split to hand. We do use a lot of independent sector, both in-source and outsource, and so I'd have to get back to you with the proportion split, but we do send out a considerable amount to independent sector.
Same. I don't unfortunately have the percentage split, but we can provide that following today.
And is it cheaper in-house or cheaper externally?
I think it depends. I would say, yeah. I think it would depend on the specialty particularly. So I couldn't give you a firm answer on that, but there is a cost implication clearly of outsourcing, and it tends to be in those areas where there are significant workforce issues, and where there are significant workforce issues, then that can have an impact on price.
Thank you very much. Do you want to indicate if you want to speak? Yeah, Leslie?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to come back to particularly the slide you were talking about, you know, the big issue about access to GPs. And I wanted to ask, in the light of certain pronouncements that have been made recently, which of course may change by tomorrow, that anyone will see a doctor within 2 weeks, and given also that we all know if increasing numbers of doctors are choosing to, the pressure's just getting ridiculous. Like, I think many of us felt that the Saturday working was just going to add under the pressure and not giving up. Do you see potential, well, how will I put it, more people potentially leaving and actually just making a statement, you will have access to a doctor in 2 weeks? I mean, how? With more resources, more training? I'm assuming it leaves you with another big headache.
Catherine, do you want to come in on that one, please?
I will do. Thanks, Vicky. It is a challenge, I think, you know, trying to balance that the preference of patients, what's clinically necessary for patients, against, you know, some of the challenges that we've just described with the workforce. However, all of the recruitment to the additional roles is really helping. So I think there are 17 roles now that practices and PCNs can choose from to support that primary care workforce. So whilst when we were earlier talking about retirement age, and we know that some of our GPs are nearing retirement age, some of our practice nurses are nearing retirement age, the fact that there's a breadth of professionals now that can support the work and see patients often sort of quicker than you would get for a GP. However, I do think there are some commitments for patients, so that we know that often it's a challenge to get through on telephone systems. So there's a big piece of work underway at the moment to look at cloud telephony and trying to make their telephone systems more resilient. So whilst we recognise that you need workforce at the other end of the telephone lines to be able to answer the calls, I think there is a real commitment to sort of broaden out the team that responds to patient demand, whilst allowing GPs to be able to really see and spend time with the patients that they need to. And often that, you know, that is sometimes for more elderly patients who prefer to see GPs face to face. So I think it's a balance of efforts across the infrastructure, the telephone system, as well as the workforce, to be able to meet the increase in demand.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else on the panel have anything around either acute or primary care at the moment? No?
Could I just ask a question? It's just it's kind of linked into what my colleagues just raised with you in relation to GP practices. There's an app you can use to go on where you can, as a resident, you can rank your GP. Now, my local GP practice is ranked in the bottom half of England. Effectively, looking at the figures, I looked at them before I came to the meeting today. 59%, just under 60% of people who use that practice have actually lost confidence and trust in their GP, and 62% are also unhappy with the appointment system and times. I don't know if that's, you know, how that compares with other practices across Kirklees, but it's really concerning that it's clear to me that a lot of work needs to be done in the primary care sector in particular with systems, I think, that need overhauling so that they're more effective and people are happier with being able to get through to their GP practices. And I just wanted to raise that, really. Thank you. Yeah.
No, thank you. I think we recognise the challenge, and certainly Catherine, working across West Yorkshire as well on primary care, recognises that. I didn't actually pick up a specific question. It was more of a statement, wasn't it? Yeah.
I'm okay, Vicky, to add a little bit of perspective on that, if that's okay. I think we do look really carefully at the annual patient survey. We look at lots of indicators that give us a sense of how patients are valuing their GP practice, as well as you know, CQC ratings, Care Quality Commission, when their inspections take place. So we do keep a very close watch on some of that data. Certainly Kirklees ranks just slightly above national average in the annual GP patient survey, but we are aware that there is variation within that. So there are some practices who fare particularly well with their experience of making appointments, and others where telephone systems particularly are quoted as being more challenging. So that's where I think patients who are able to access services digitally will benefit, but also where we can do some work on the infrastructure itself, both the IT systems, the telephony systems, and the estate itself.
Can I just ask as a follow-up from that then, because you did highlight that your overall experience of GP practice, that there's variation across both primary care networks and GP practices themselves. Which are the most challenged primary care networks?
think there are lots of indicators within the patient survey. There are a broad range of questions that range from your overall experience, as well as some more specifics about how the sort of perception of the individual appointments and clinicians were. And I think it would be unfair to pick out a particular PCN in terms of that broad range of answers, because I think each have got their own challenges. So, for example, if you think about the valleys, they've got challenges around geography and being able to access sites across some very challenging terrain, particularly in winter, whereas in other areas in Kirklees, there might be more challenges around making sure that we've got the right level of interpreting services and translation services. So I think we do look at those indicators very closely and work to support the practices to try and address those. And we really encourage the PCNs to look at the patient feedback and consider that in their PCN meetings and make plans to address the things that are highlighted.
That's great. I think we're going to have a look at PCNs as another scrutiny meeting anyway, so hopefully we'll be able to see that data then. Can I take other questions from the panel? If not, I'll go back to my list. Go.
Thank you. Mine was more about the market sufficiency, particularly independent home care. I think, and just, sorry, I'm trying to lean to look at you, but also speaking to the microphone. It's around spot contracts and the use of spot contracts. And I'm conscious that if there's, there's obviously another winter capacity issue arising, is that something that you would increase?
Yeah, we spot contract depending on the demand. So what it does is it gives us the flexibility to buy enough capacity across the market where that capacity exists.
So could it, because obviously I'm over COVID, etc., I'm assuming spot contracts were used quite a bit, and that there's a significant number of hours per week being spent on spot contracts. Are you concerned at all about kind of the risks involved in that, or to increase that by, because they're not accredited by the council and they may be registered with CQC but not necessarily have been inspected? If I'm correct.
Yeah, all of any spot contracts, we talk about care home placements, all of them will...
No, I'm talking about domiciliary care.
Sorry, domiciliary care. They will need to be CQC registered unless it's an arrangement through a direct payment, but they will need to be registered. But all of those people will have a review of their needs. So we aim to review people within 6 weeks of the care commencing to make sure that it's meeting the needs in a dignified and personalised way. The approach with spot contracting, and it does support an element of choice for people as well, although sometimes it is the only available offer given geographic locations. But we have an arrangement with a framework where people can join the framework, so that we do have an arrangement with them to do that.
Sorry to interrupt. Is it correct that some of those people, some of those spot contractors have been through the accreditation process and have failed, but they still have a contract, and that others haven't been through the accreditation process at all?
Okay, there isn't an accreditation process as such. What there is a framework where people are on our framework as providers who are working with the council around the usual rate. Placement rates are it's not my area of expertise, if I'm honest, but the placement rates, the hourly rates can change slightly then if people aren't on our framework, and we have to make arrangements either through what is called a DPS system, so they are added onto the framework as additional spot contract capacity, or through a direct payment arrangement, which is around an individual's preference.
I understand the framework, though, that there are checks made through the framework on the provider in terms of their quality of provision, etc. Various I don't know it in detail, but
well, yeah.
I suppose it's just the concern that if those organisations and companies have either chosen not to go through that framework or have chosen to go through that framework and failed, that if people remain with those spot contracts with those providers, that seems different to the people who are with the organisations who've been through the framework and had that level of scrutiny from Kirklees, and that if we're coming into capacity issues, if they are going to continue and grow, I'm just slightly concerned about the risks involved in that, because even if someone's registered with CQC, it doesn't mean that they've been inspected. And particularly, obviously, because of COVID, all those are, I assume, there's a backlog of inspections.
Yeah, we have a duty of care to everybody, regardless of how the services are arranged. So we should be able to pick up with people at the reviews, and we can have planned reviews which should be at least annually or outside of that as required. So if people have concerns and people do contact us about the quality of care, we follow them up irrespective of whether they're on the framework or not.
I understand that, but it's the equality between, does someone know that they're with a, and I'll use the term accredited again, I know but someone who's been through that framework process, I'm sort of questioning if you're going to put people with a spot contractor who people might not know they're with a spot contractor, and then there are other people who are on the framework. Why have the framework if you do you see what I mean? I'm trying to.
I do see what you mean, but it is a risk. You know, the more providers we have to work with, the more difficult it is for us to build relationships and to work with those providers. We've got the Care Alliance, and we have providers now who are partners with us in some of our meetings around transfer of care and things to talk through that. And we don't exclude anybody based on whether they're on the framework or not. We'll work with providers irrespective.
It was more the concern for the lack of scrutiny in terms of the delivery to service users.
Yeah, we're not.
And whether they're aware of the difference and what the checks and balances are.
Okay.
For that. But maybe that's quite detailed. So
it is, and commissioning and the contracts isn't within my portfolio. But I understand what you're saying. But I can find out, what that level of assurance is around, and I'll make sure that we get that answer back to Richard and out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just related, I just wanted to know a definition of what a spot contract is, please.
A block contract is when we commission, say, 10 places in a care home, and even if there's only 3 people there, we're still paying for the 10 places. Spot contracts are when we just commission placements as and when they're required, and for the length of time that they're required. Is a kind of. Does that answer? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my question was really more about the discharge process, in particularly related to intermediate care and reablement and the timescales. So in another role that I do, I've recently been made aware that there's people that are actually waiting for equipment, and I know that there has been delays in people equipment, but I wonder what the situation was now, because somebody that I'm particularly aware of is waiting for a wheelchair ramp and is remaining in a hospital bed because the wheelchair ramp can't be found. And the other is in relation to reablement, and I'm just curious to know what the acceptance or referral rates or the timescales are, I reckon, is what I'm trying to say, between somebody being medically fit in hospital and then being able to be accepted by a reablement or an intermediate care service, and whether that's creating an unnecessary block to their prompt discharge.
So could I suggest that Amanda picks up the equipment And then if Philippa could pick up the intermediate care from a local perspective, with support from Amanda.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up as well. Okay, so the specifics around a wheelchair ramp, I would need to understand whether that was a permanent fixture, which would be something that would be arranged through the Accessible Homes team, or whether that's a piece of equipment that is coming through the community equipment service. In the specifics of that. So if you would like to share me the specific details, I can certainly inquire into that and give a more specific answer, and that we can have a look what's happening there.
Thank you. Just in a more general term then, is equipment usually is it able to be sourced quite promptly? Because I'm aware kind of in COVID times and at Brexit times, there were certainly problems getting quite simple equipment that you'd expect an equipment service to hold, just walkers or rollators, and I just wondered what the case was now.
Yeah, so in the COVID pandemic, when we were having particular difficulties getting some equipment through, we had to put some messages out around alternative pieces of equipment, but now I'm not aware of any issues that we're having. Sometimes if things are bespoke, and they need to be made specifically, then there can be a time delay in getting those items of equipment. But general stock, there I'm not aware of any issues or capacity problems with getting those to people. So it may be that if it's bespoke, made to measure, or it's a very unusual piece of equipment, but it is available, there's often a long lead-in time. Yeah. And it's like car parts and everything else, that these times the materials can be difficult to get hold of. So there can be some specific delays around those requests.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, if Philippa and Amanda want to answer the intermediate care specific question.
And reablement, I guess, as well. Not just intermediate care, but reablements. Yeah.
Thank you. Helen's going to come in and support here. Thanks.
Yeah, so for reablement and intermediate care beds, we've got an integrated system. So we do multidisciplinary team and joint assessments to try and get people on the right pathway. In relation to equipment, we're really good in Kirklees, particularly in comparison to some of our neighbours around the access to that. Like Amanda said, anything that's really specialised and specific, we need to rely on family members to be there in the property to be able to get that sourced. We do look at putting interim arrangements in place, so we don't have to delay people coming out, but we do understand sometimes that may pose a delay. In relation to intermediate care, there's not particularly a day. We've got 2 days usually to get people into a bed setting when they're medically optimised and have no longer reason to reside. We have experienced some issues with intermediate care bed bases due to workforce capacity from our local authority care element of it, which has reduced the numbers of admissions over the last few weeks. We are looking at increasing those and looking at how we can support people coming out. We have looked at opportunities through the D2A process and look at any spot purchasing arrangements if we can get people into a setting as opposed to an intermediate care bed base. If that can support as an alternative, but we are starting to step that back up now. Everybody on the list has got an allocated bed, so we have got a discharge process in place at the moment. But we have seen some delays in the last few weeks, but that has improved.
Okay, thank you. I guess just kind of just a bit more further information would be useful. I mean, it's great that in the big pack you say that 80% of people that are requiring a rapid response or urgent care receive a reablement service. But if you flip that on the side, that means 20% aren't. So what are they potentially at risk of being staying in hospital, readmitted? What happens to that 20%?
Yeah, if from a community referral perspective, we do have our UCR service, which we do some short-term care, so we'll provide that immediate input until they can move on and transfer care into a service, whether it's reablement or into our usual community rehab services. So we'll deliver care up to 7 days. However, if it goes beyond that, we will continue to support the therapy needs. So although they might not be there within 80, the 20% will have an element of support until they can have a place. Okay. And then we've got transfers of care in place, so they will just transfer and their care will continue within that team.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Can I just ask a question on the back of that? If you were an acute trust, how many patients at the moment, or what percentage of patients at the moment would you anticipate are medically stable and could be discharged? Because we've heard some positive stories about 40 additional patients being discharged every week, and the positive news about equipment and such. What percentage of beds are actually being utilised by patients who could be out in the community or within intermediate care, and how much impact is that having on your elective flow?
I'll start if you like. So around about 100 patients currently on a transfer of care list awaiting discharge. It fluctuates, but I would say it's around about a fifth of our bed base.
Let me just ask, is that a Kirklees lens?
No. No, it's not. It is roughly 50-50.
Sorry, it's roughly 50-50. Yeah. When we look at it on a daily basis, it does fluctuate, as Johnny said, but I think a safe assumption is it usually runs about 50-50. So it's 50% Calderdale, 50% CHFT, even as it comes down. So I think at some points we've been as low as about 60 to 70. But again, it's still been roughly 50% Calderdale's, 50% Kirklees. Does fluctuate if there are pressures within domiciliary care in any one side. But that 100 is probably quite a consistent number per day across the trust.
Sorry, Johnny, go again.
No, it's fine. I mean, Andrew's just pulled it up for Monday for me, and it was exactly 50 on Monday for Kirklees. And the second part of your question, sorry, was, would you just remind me?
It was just about what impact that has on your elective load, really, whether or not you're getting elective patients through, or are they in elective beds?
Okay, so no, they're not in elective beds. I think the pressure is more on the broader hospital site. So those patients are essentially within non-elective bed base. That bed base expands up and down with the pressures through the front door with A&E and so on. But currently there isn't an impact on the elective care programme.
So we're not getting any cancelled electives?
Not on the back of the top list that we just described.
I don't have the exact numbers, I'm not as good as Johnny, but it's usually around 100 medically fit for discharge patients, but it doesn't affect our electives at all at the moment.
Thank you very much for that. Is there anything else on that? Because I just want to move on to just Low Carla for a minute, if we can. Couple of questions for Low Carla. The waiting list, is that from referral to actually being seen? Because that worries me that we've got a 2-year waiting list to actually get access to a clinician for things like dental and therapy, and I dread to think what kind of state people's teeth are in and how crooked they are by the time they get to therapy, if that's the case. Whilst I'm at it, you've talked about a waiting list ambition tracker. Clearly that's not working at the moment, so I'd like to understand why, or what the benefit of that is.
I think that's Philippa and Helen to address.
Thanks. So absolutely recognise the particular challenge for dental services, and it's really important to note that we have been running limited capacity in our dental services because of the impact of complying with COVID guidance. But we have been really prioritising and focusing on ensuring that patients with learning difficulties are seen as a priority, those urgent referrals are dealt with, and patients who are in pain are prioritised. So really important, again, through that triage and process, that we're reviewing and prioritising patients appropriately. Also that we're then supporting and communicating with those patients and understanding the difficulty in providing some of those services for people who have significantly long waits. So that's the point on dental. There are some other areas, particularly for those long waits within adult therapy services, and actually all 27 of those patients waiting 104 plus weeks are waiting for a specific educational course around diabetes and controlling their diabetes as well as possible. It's an educational course delivered. It was impacted on again through the delivery route because of COVID, and we're just doing some work to realign that programme to see what we can deliver virtually and ensuring that we've got the right skilled workforce. Apologies, I've forgotten the second part of your question, but Helen, was there anything you wanted to add on that?
No, I just think where we've got our priorities, so for example, speech and language. So with adult therapies, it's split down into different groups, but within those, it's bulked together. And I know within our speech and language, we have been doing some specific trajectory work because of our workforce pressures. So we do some urgent and then routine work where we'll prioritise and we'll engage with the patients waiting. So we're continually doing that and do some self-management work during that time while we wait. We've just done a piece of work around adult therapies and looking at modernising, moving it into a community rehab service, and that's been split up into 4 key areas. So we have, for example, we have a community stroke, a neuro and complex disabilities, salt and diet, and then we have another one which frailty and orthopaedics, sorry. So we've been doing some reviews about how we can improve the referrals coming through, how we can transfer care between our services so we don't have to reassess, which is giving more capacity within the teams, and then how we can use different sources of support to help patients through technology, looking at assessments, how we can transfer. So some of these might be waiting for a follow-up with a band 4, that a holistic assessment might have been done over the phone. So we do prioritise where there may be some risk of those, and we do some specific programmes around that. So we will expect to see some significant improvement under the new modelling moving forwards in our community rehab.
Thanks, Helen. And I think that links to the second part of your question that's just come back to me around the trajectories and how we're modelling that within each service. So 100% there is work to do. There is some changes that we need to make to that model to ensure that it's robust and that we can use it effectively.
So do we have a timeline when we won't have any two-year waits, and are you on a trajectory to get below 1 year at some stage?
We are on a trajectory. Like I said, those particular challenges for those 2-year waits are very specific to those 2 service types. So we've just employed an additional diabetic dietitian who's going through the training to roll out the Daphne course. And we're looking at some specific challenges around dental capacity, acknowledging that the challenge we're going to have dependent upon the COVID guidance, infection prevention and control, and the challenges that we have in that sector. So I think we're going to be keeping that under review. But yeah, Helen, any detail you want to add?
No, I think it's just particularly for the Daphne course. It's there's difficulties within Calderdale as well. Mid-Yorks deliver an alternative, so we are exploring actually could we look at that alternative, but there will be having an element of support in other areas. It's just that one education programme in relation to that one.
Okay, that's great. It will be nice to see, particularly for dental, because you've got big numbers coming up, what your trajectory is there, except what you're doing about Daphne. Can I just ask, I think we're nearly at the end of the meeting, so is there anything that anybody wanted to say about concerns that they've got, or any further questions that the panel want to put? No? Okay. So thank you again, Vicky, for presenting, and thank you everybody for attending. We obviously know some of the pressures that we've got around elective, and some of the pressures you've got around achieving some of the targets that have been set, as well as the rest of the information that you've given us. Thank you very much. Okay. We just have one more item to discuss, so please forgive us if we don't say goodbye properly. All right, but we'll allow you to sneak out while we're just going through it. Thank you. Okay, we're on the downhill now. It's just about the work programme. So really it's just about us going through and making sure that we're still on track with work programme. Obviously, had a really good session today. We're expecting in December to talk about it was integration of health and adult social care. That's actually going to be a bit more about joined up care at neighbourhood levels. That will pick up some of the issues that we've looked at around primary care networks, if that's okay with yourselves. So a bit more focus on primary care. Yeah? Okay. I think there's a lot to look at around dentistry, and I did mention at the pre-meet that perhaps we have got enough now with a Kirklees lens, not just to do it at West Yorkshire. I would like us to schedule that for March if everybody's happy with that. So we'll talk about oral health, but we'll also talk about dentistry as well as part of that. What else have we got coming up? New plan for adult social care reform. So I think we had quite a few questions about adult social care today, and again, it'll just help us join the T's, dot the I's and cross the T's. So yeah, and we're meeting with Emily from Public Health and with Michael Crowther from End of Life to just draft out what we might discuss in January. So what are the key issues for January? So I'll let you know how we're doing on that. So is there anything else about the work plan that people would like to see or feel that there are big themes that are coming out at the moment?
Can you just clarify, when I raised the issue about the lack of scrutiny for mental health and young people, where was it you wanted me to bring?
I thought that what you were talking particularly about is what's happening in at a school and a primary care perspective. So I think it fits nicely under next month's agenda. So where we're talking about joined up care, we have also included in that now, let me just have a look at my notes. We've included in that something around the primary care networks, how they're developing, and something around neighbourhoods in there. So I think it would work in there.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's fine.
And if you aren't able to make it, submit a question. We'll make sure it goes in.
I'm hoping by then.
Yeah. Anything else on the work plan? Okay. I think we're doing very well. Thank you very much, panel, for your attention and questions and probing. That's yeah. I think we're getting a picture of how things are at the moment, aren't we? It is worrying. Yeah. 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 Okay. Let's finish the meeting and then we can turn the microphone off. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks very much.